As many of you know, Hollywood is a delightful land of fun and fantasy where starry-eyed dreamers come from every broken home and rehab facility across America to turn their miserable lives into the kind of entertainment that will spread their fetid imaginations over your mind like a stain, or a virus, or possibly one of those really nasty funguses that starts in your big toenail and ends up consuming your entire body, so you look like someone tried to make a model of a human being out of cottage cheese and then forgot about it, and the thing turned green and started to stink. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, Hollywood. Today, for a change of pace, I thought I'd take a little time off from the hurly-burly of politics and bring a little of that Hollywood glamour and romance and intellectual poison into your humdrum lives by letting you in on my latest film project. I've recently started work on a delightful and hilarious new comedy screenplay called White. Think of it as a sort of sequel to Big, the 1988 smash starring Tom Hanks. As you may remember, in Big, a little boy wishes he could be big, and lo and behold, the next morning he wakes up a little boy in a man's body. And I know I don't have to tell you, hilarity ensues. My story, White, is about the first black president of the United States, Barack Obama. One day near the end of his term, Barack is reading the New York Times, a former newspaper, and he thinks to himself, wow, it says here I've achieved so much. I've fixed our healthcare system, ended the wars in the Middle East, and brought our nation's races closer together. Imagine what I could have accomplished if it weren't for all the racism I've experienced. I wish I could be white for just a day. Well, what do you know? The next morning, the president wakes up and hold the phone, he's turned into a white man, just as he wished. Well, Barack is so excited, he immediately calls a press conference. The reporters take one look at him and start shouting questions. Mr. President, says the reporter from the Times, how does it feel to be one of the most incompetent failures who's ever held the highest office in the land? Incompetent failure, says Barack Obama, absolutely shocked. Why, that's disrespectful. Well, we're journalists, sir. It's not our job to respect you, the reporter points out. The fact is your health care bill is a disaster. Your bungling of the Middle East has left the area in flames. You've made racial tensions so much worse, and the economy sucks. But I'm the first black president, says Barack. It's racist to call me a failure. The first black president, says the reporter, but you're white. Oh no, says Barack, and he quickly rushes off to the Oval Office where he cries out, please, Lord, make me black again. And sure enough, the next morning he wakes up black and he's the best president ever. It says so right there in the New York Times. Doesn't that sound like a hilarious movie? I'm already planning a sequel about Hillary Clinton. It's called Mail. Trigger warning, I'm Andrew Klavan, and this is The Andrew Klavan Show.
I feel hunky-dunky, life is tickety-boo. Birds are winging, also singing hunky-dunky-doo. Ship-shaped, ipsy-topsy, the world is zippity-zing. It's a wonderful day, hurrah, hooray! It makes me want to sing. Oh, hurrah, hooray! Oh, hooray, hurrah!
Hooray, hurrah, the Klavanless weekend is over. And what a Klavanless weekend it was, man. The internet went down. And do you know how the internet went down? Do you know how they did it? Have you heard about this? Oh, man, this is really scary. Every time you make a request on the internet and it goes into one of these things called a DNS, I can't remember what it stands for, but it doesn't matter. It's a domain name service or something like this. So what they did is they infected all these objects, everyday household objects that you may have, like a baby monitor, a cell phone, anything that hooks into the internet, and they put malware in it so that they would all suddenly go off at once and storm the DNSs and shut them down. And so it was all in your stuff. It was they took over your stuff, your individual household stuff that goes to the internet, and they infected it with malware, and then it all went off and shut the internet down. And so I mentioned this to start the show. We're going to get to the election, get to Donald Trump at Gettysburg, because I thought that was a really kind of remarkable speech he gave at Gettysburg and what that means. But before, this is kind of the theme of the show. I don't know about anybody else, but I find this with WikiLeaks. I found it with this hack over the weekend. When I was in college, I wrote an essay on Paradise Lost, which is the famous poem about Satan falling from heaven and his polluting, he's engineering the fall of mankind as revenge against God. And every undergraduate notices as he reads this great poem that Satan is kind of the hero of the piece. You're kind of rooting for Satan in some way. You know, you realize he's evil, but at the same time, you kind of like him. He's kind of an anti-hero. And every undergraduate in the world writes, you know, about Satan being the anti-hero. And I was the same. And I wrote this piece in which I said, you know, when there is an absolute power, even if it's an absolute power for good, there's something heroic about taking it on. You know, there's something just the human heart instinctively responds to this individual defying this absolute power, even if it's the absolute power of goodness. And my professor, who was one of the most famous Milton scholars of his time, I was at Berkeley, which was like one of the great English departments in the world, he wrote on the corner of my piece, "This is moral applesauce," you know, which was, I don't know if they still use that expression, as an expression for BS. This is moral BS. And I thought, I wasn't making a moral point. I had nothing to do with morality. I was just making a point. But I was right about this. I was right about this. When something is that powerful, even if the power is benign, there is something that the human heart responds to about people taking it on. So WikiLeaks, Julian Assange is not our friend. Julian Assange is not the friend of Republicans or conservatives just because right now he's releasing stuff about Hillary Clinton. And yet the government is now such a powerful, powerful instrument, whether you like what it's doing or you don't like what it's doing. There's something about this antic, individualistic craziness where just a guy, you know, they're saying it might be somebody fighting for Julian Assange to get back at the fact that John Kerry influenced the Ecuadorians to shut down his internet and all this stuff. You know, there's something about it that you kind of respond to. You kind of say, like, yes, you know, freedom, you know, like Braveheart, you sort of say freedom, rebellion. And even in this, you know, and when you're watching AT&T taking over Time Warner, making a bid to take over Time Warner, and this is not your cable service. If you have Time Warner cable service, they already unloaded that. But this means that like one company is now going to be controlling all this stuff. And what happens to this? They have to go through all these, they have to jump over all these government hoops, right? All these regulatory hoops to make this merger come through. So the government, which loves the government, is now going to be making sure that AT&T doesn't change anything, like the fact that CNN loves the government and HBO loves the government. The left wing, which is the government, remember, the left is always for the government, it's always for bigger government, it's always going to solve all your problems through the government, is now going to be regulating this one big company and saying, and if you want this to go through, by the way, you know, they're going to call it independence. Make sure CNN remains independent. Make sure CNN is not independent. CNN is the hack political, you know, communication arm of the Democratic Party, and so is HBO, which does great shows, all of which lean left. I mean, there is no, you show me a show, you know, they did that thing on Anita Hill, this debunked woman, this debunked charges against Clarence Thomas, which wouldn't have been important even if they hadn't been debunked, but you know, they just completely took Clarence Thomas apart. They've been rewriting history on HBO. Lyndon Johnson is the great civil rights hero. All this stuff that they do on HBO, you think that's going to go away if the government is in control of it? And this is what people are so furious about. You can't move, you can't breathe. And when something goes wrong, who do you turn to? You turn to daddy, you turn to the people with all the power. What are you doing wrong that's making my life miserable? You're no longer taking responsibility for your own life. You just want to get back at the power, hence Donald Trump. So Donald Trump looks like he's losing, and maybe he's not, maybe it's all a scam, but even Kellyanne Conway came out and said, well, you know, this is, before we go to Kellyanne Conway, this is the aftermath of the third debate, which I thought Trump won handily. I thought he won going away, but the press spun it into this whole thing about, he says elections are being rigged, so he's the enemy of democracy. But let's just take a quick look at a recap of the third debate.
Let's do this in B flat minor.
Such a nasty woman.
He choked. He choked. He goes around with crocodile tears.
Such a nasty woman.
We have so many adversaries overseas. Can we all agree to be frenemies?
I would work with our allies in the Middle East. That's the only way we're going to keep the peace.
Okay.
Muscle, so sad, so sad. It's a catastrophe. So bad, so bad.
Can everyone achieve the American dream? Or should they sign up for my Ponzi scheme?
We are are gonna go where the money is.
All right.
We are gonna help small businesses.
Our jobs are being sucked out of our economy. Right now, our country is dying. Big three.
We've gotta do.
That's Songify with Weird Al Yankovic they got in this time. These have been my favorite parodies of the election because they're actually pretty fair. You know, they actually just make fun of everybody. And they're just anyway. So the last debate is over. The polls, like, it's really hard to tell because there are these outlying polls like the Investor Business Daily poll and all this stuff. But look, at this point, there are polls that are showing Texas as a toss-up. You know, Texas, where they're supposed to be like lining up on the border with guns to make sure nobody like Hillary Clinton even thinks about Texas. Texas may be on the line. And even Kellyanne Conway, the head of Trump's campaign, his communications person, is saying they're behind.
We are behind. She has some advantages, like $66 million in ad buys just in the month of September, thereby doubling her ad buys from August. Most of those ads are negative against Donald Trump, classic politics of personal destruction, cesspool kind of ads. And she has tremendous advantages. She has a former president, happens to be her husband, campaigning for her, the current president and first lady, vice president, all much more popular than she can hope to be. But she's seen as the incumbent. So our advantage going in, where we're behind 1, 3, 4 points in some of these swing states that Mitt Romney lost to President Obama, Chuck, our advantage is that Donald Trump is just going to continue to take the case directly to the people. He doesn't expect to be able to cut through the noise or the silence and the way we're treated by some. And so he's taken the case. He's going to visit all these swing states many times, as is his running mate, Governor Pence. And we feel that with Hillary Clinton under 50% in some of these places, even though she has run a very traditional and expensive campaign, that we have a shot of getting those undecided voters that somehow have said, I know who Hillary Clinton is. I don't want to vote for her. I don't much trust her, like her. We need to bring them aboard over the next couple of weeks.
Now, this is why this is maddening. Okay, well, it really does look like he's certainly, let's say he's fighting an uphill battle. Let's put it that way, all right? And look, if ever things were going to go differently than the polls said they were, this is the election year, I wouldn't count on it. Let's be realistic. The polls have been pretty accurate for the last 2 elections cycles. Here's why this is so maddening to even someone like me who doesn't like Trump and wishes we had come up with another nominee. There is a story in the Wall Street Journal this morning, on the front page of the Wall Street Journal, that's huge. It's going to flash across your screens for 10 minutes, and then it's going to be gone with the next nonsense story that the left drums up to take down Trump. The political organization of Virginia Governor Terry McAuliffe, an influential Democrat with long-standing ties to Bill and Hillary Clinton, gave nearly $500,000 to the election campaign of the wife of an official at the Federal Bureau of Investigation who later helped oversee the investigation into Mrs. Clinton's email use. Okay? You've got that, right? Terry McAuliffe, he's broken records for raising funds for Bill and Hillary Clinton. He gave $500,000 to the election campaign of the wife of an FBI official who oversaw the election into Hillary Clinton's emails. The investigation that essentially said, yes, she's violated the law, but we're not going to prosecute her because something, because she's Hillary Clinton, basically. Campaign finance records show Mr. McAuliffe's Political Action Committee donated $467,500 to the 2015 state Senate campaign of Dr. Jill McCabe, who is married to Andrew McCabe, now the deputy director of the FBI. The Virginia Democratic Party, over which Mr. McAuliffe exerts considerable control, donated an additional $207,000+. And a spokesman for the governor said he supported Jill McCabe because he believed she would be a good state senator. This is a customary practice for Virginia governors. Any insinuation that his support was tied to anything other than his desire to elect candidates who would help pass his agenda is ridiculous. And we will find out why the word ridiculous does not apply here in just a moment. But first, we have to say goodbye to our friends on Facebook and YouTube. Come over to the Daily Wire. Come on, it's home. You could subscribe for $8 lousy bucks, a lousy $8 a month, and you could see the entire show on the Daily Wire streaming live, and also get Ben Shapiro's show, and we'll send you a copy of his new novel, True Allegiance, and it'll be great. Come on over.